Let's go live to Kiev now. Max Tucker, editor at Kiev Post. Max, good to talk to you. I know you've been reporting from inside Debaltseve. Just give us a sense of what it's like for people there at the moment.
The situation there is catastrophic. Buildings bombed out, people living in their basements for weeks for fear of being hit by the shells, which rained down pretty indiscriminately all around the town. We saw families who were melting snow in order to have some drinking water. They had no water, no electricity, no heating, and no food. It's an absolute dire situation for people there. And the soldiers are facing the same kind of problems now. They've been cut off from their supplies, run out of ammunition, run out of food, and they face a tough decision now to surrender to the separatist forces or die fighting them off.
And if they surrender to the pro-Russian rebels, what chance do you think, as President Putin seems to suggest, that the rebels will let them go?
I think it's very unlikely that the rebels will let them go simply because they might see them returning to the front lines to fight against them. What we have seen throughout the conflict is occasional prisoner swaps, but it's very concerning when you see this amount of Ukrainian soldiers taken into custody, because we've had many reports of separatist forces torturing, beating Ukrainian soldiers once they are taken into custody. We've even seen horrific shots of very badly wounded Ukrainian soldiers on the ground being kicked and beaten by separatist forces.
Max, did this ceasefire ever really happen? And given the facts on the ground, can any ceasefire hold, do you think?
I think the ceasefire maybe lasted perhaps 40 minutes before shelling resumed around Debaltseve. And it's pretty much been stillborn. I think any chance for peace is very remote, as long as Europe and Ukraine is continuing to make concessions to the separatists. They're on the offensive, they're winning, they're backed by superior Russian armor. We've seen that the European Union has acknowledged that Russian troops have been deployed in Ukraine for the first time yesterday. So it's a very difficult situation for the Ukrainians. The separatists feel that they've got the upper hand. They've gone on the offensive. They're winning territory. They did that at Donetsk airport. They broke the first Minsk agreement. They're now breaking the second, and I see very little hope for peace in the future.
So, Max, just briefly, if you can, I'm sure you know that President Putin has called on the government in Kiev to withdraw its forces from Debaltseve and from the east, in effect, give up that part of the country. Do you think that is likely to happen? And if it did happen, what message does that send to President Putin about his ambitions for the rest of the region?
I think it's very unlikely that Poroshenko will agree to give up that part of the region. I mean, we've seen suicidal missions, really, where troops in Donetsk airport, troops in Ilovaisk, troops in Debaltseve have been told to stay their ground. And basically their task is to try and kill as many Russian soldiers, as many separatist fighters as possible, in the hope that eventually they buy time for Western weapons to arrive. And the West now faces a difficult decision. Do they arm Ukrainian forces and possibly escalate the situation, see more Russian forces in the region, or do they completely cave in, allowing Putin to do what he wants in the region, as we've seen him do in Georgia, Transnistria, now Ukraine, and possibly the Baltics? Or do they enact a new round of sanctions in the hope that they can finally put pay to Putin's global ambitions?
Max Tucker, editor at Kiev Post. Very interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much for your insights.